Okay, we're live on Facebook too. Okay, we just have another minute and then we'll get started. So is this your first Facebook Live, Cameron?
It is my very first Facebook Live.
I'm starting to get used to them. You just have to start and then you get more comfortable with them.
Gotcha. I enjoyed watching you and Whitney. Was that 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, it was a couple weeks ago. So we've been had the opportunity to bring a couple people on from the team, and it's been pretty fun. Not just doing them alone. I like doing things with other people. So.
Gotcha.
All right. Let me find a few notes. Okay, it's 12 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm really excited. Today we're going to show you how to have a productive team virtually. I know all of us have been forced to work from home and go virtual, or the majority of people in America and worldwide. And our company has been virtual for about 5 years. And so, and Cameron's been with our team, maybe close to a year. And he's been great to have on. Cameron is the president of the center and very much has a new perspective and a different perspective than I always have had. And so it's been great to have him on board. And even those perspectives I think that we're the same on, what's been cool is I've always done things because they've kind of felt right, or I had trial and error and didn't really understand why I did things, or that some of the things that I experienced with teams was actually normal. And so I'm excited to have Cameron on because he will be able to put some of that to terminology into words and hopefully show you how you can have a productive team virtual and remote. So to start off, Cameron, do you want to just maybe start with a little background on yourself and how you kind of started working with teams, or why you love working with teams and the human aspect of things?
Sure. So I actually started with a human services background, working for individuals affected by disabilities. And then that was very team oriented. Every time we were talking about helping someone overcome a challenge in their life, it was always team effort. Then I went into HR and just started helping more people affect the lives of others by empowering them to be more effective employees. And once again, very team oriented, a lot of training on team building. In fact, I became certified in a human interaction system called the MANT system, which talked about team aspects a lot. I really enjoyed that. And during this time, in college, I went and I became part of a team that had Matt, Greg, and Devin. And the four of us, we were an extraordinarily performant team. As an individual, I was very weak in that area. I was first getting into technology, coming from a human services area and HR into technology. That's quite a gap usually in there. And relying on my team members of Greg, Matt, and Devin, we all brought different strengths to the table. And boy, howdy, we were so performant. And I kept trying to figure out why the four of us together could outproduce other teams much larger than our own, or having even better talent than ours. And over time, ended up taking as much training as I could on team formation and team building. In fact, Minan, who works for our company now, she put on a training back in 2015 that I attended, and that was amazing. So it was essentially 2 weeks of training, or 2 different weeks of training, followed by an 18-month course of implementing the training. And so really allowed a deep dive into team formations and how to engineer teams. And using my background of working with different teams in the past and being on management teams and all of the experience applied with this theory, really solidified my position on how teams can work together, and the how typical things are when they don't go well in teams, and how typical things are when teams become performant. And so
I'll say this. I'm going to have you actually expound on that. So when Cameron first came on with the center, Cameron would say how good I am at building teams and things like that. I said, well, I've learned it from trial and error. Like I didn't go through any of the formal training that he had done. And I did a lot of the things because I knew they had to be done to keep teams formed and performing. And for me, it didn't, I wouldn't say it comes naturally. But I've had bad teams before, and I wanted to keep a good team. And so when Cameron came on, he started to put terminology to some of the things that I was experiencing with some of the teams. It was really cool. So I'm going to list the 4 things if that works, and then you can expand on them. Does that work?
Sure. Yeah.
See if I remember them. So team forming, team storming, team norming, and team performing.
There you go. You got all 4.
Cool. And so what was cool about that is I realized that all these stages that teams go through are actually very normal. And so a lot of times when I had teams before, I was really, oh no, everything's falling apart because my team's not working and everything's going in the wrong direction. And so when Cameron said that teams go through all these cycles, just like in relationships, we go through cycles, or, if we're angry at somebody, we have cycles that we go through. And so it's cool to see that teams have cycles. And so Cameron, do you want to maybe expand on those 4 aspects?
Sure. So team formation, that's, the honeymoon period. Everybody gets together. They're all really excited. People aren't really good at what they're doing, but their enthusiasm's high, and it's great. And your goal might be here, but not everybody has the same goal because they're not united, and that's fine. And that's an exciting period. Lots of excitement. That's team forming. Team storming. If you think of team storming like brainstorming, when you're trying to figure things out, you're like, well, what about this? What about that? Team storming is where you lose people. This is the part that people eject themselves. They're like, I don't want to be part of this team. I had no idea that that's how it was. And they eject themselves or they withdraw. Usually that the symptoms there are skills are still kind of low, and that excitement starts to drop because people are realizing, oh, we have to figure things out. And, when you have problems, sometimes people get stuck in the drudgery of trying to get through those problems. Team norming, this is really exciting for most people. They get,
I realized I might not have been live on Instagram. So, oh yeah, see now we're sideways.
Let me turn that down.
Yeah, let me see if I can. Sorry.
Hello, Instagram.
I haven't done. Okay, good.
So we're talking about teams. I just covered team storming or team forming, team storming, and now we're talking about team norming. And this is really cool because with team norming, we get enthusiasm starts to rise and skill starts to rise. So you start to get a lot of value out of the work. Even if the enthusiasm isn't crazy high, it's on the uptick. And that's a great place to be. And most teams actually live their lives in team norming. You inject a new person, you kind of go back to storming a little bit. Sometimes you go back to forming. And then you get back to norming, and you just live there. What's an amazing place to be is in team performing. And what skill level, crazy high, enthusiasm, crazy high, the ability to handle new events, no problem. Teams that are in team performing and teams that live there, you inject a new situation in, no problem. They still perform. You inject a new person, that person either starts to perform quickly or they eject themselves because they can't handle it. It's a great place to live.
Cool. That's really great. So now that some of those teams you worked on were in physical offices, right?
Yep.
And now that you are with a 100% remote company, how do you feel like those same principles apply to a remote company, and can you apply them better, or what's your opinion of remote teams? And
so if you have physical presence teams, you ought to take some time to do work virtually just for the benefits of doing remote work and team building that is remote. And I'll explain in just a second. In the same aspect, if you're working with remote teams and you're 100% remote, you need to do some of the things in the physical world that will bring teams and make them stronger there. For example, here at the center, we do a lot of mailings. We deliver physical things to people. We have physical emojis. So this is the physical world, even though we're in a virtual environment. So we do a lot that is physical in nature, but that is to build on some of the strengths that you get by being physical. My opinion is the benefits of working remotely with a team far outweigh being physically present. And there are some things that take more time in a remote environment to build. But as far as team performance goes, when you are in team performance in a virtual world or working remotely, everybody is able to bring their full strength to bear when they show up. And there's a ton of benefits. So my opinion is that working remotely actually has greater benefits to team morale and team performance than a physical presence in the real world. Now, getting there, that can be more of a challenge, especially when people aren't used to it. But once you're in that team performance, it's a wonderful place to be.
Yeah, because there's a lot of companies that have been physical up to this point and been in physical offices, and now that they're remote, and when they were in the physical office, they might have actually been norming or performing as a team. And so do you feel like that they can go back to a storming state when they get into a virtual world?
Oh, absolutely. You change the environment on a team that's in norming, they are likely to go back into storming simply because they are so dependent on each other, and they haven't created an independent state so that they can be interdependent with each other. And this is reference to Stephen R. Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You start off dependent, you move to independent so that then you can be interdependent. In the same way with teams, if you're in norming and you've been in norming on the physical side, in the real world, when you switch to a virtual environment, you either are lost because you haven't needed to be completely independent, and independence is required to go into interdependence so that you can actually be performant. So it throws you back into storming because you're having to figure out new things. Also, disruptions for a team that's normally in team normalization or always in team storming, what happens is you'll lose productivity. Productivity just goes out the window because people sit at their desk and they're like, well, I need to talk to so-and-so. This Slack thing, that's not working for me. So you have technology challenges that for a team that's in performance, being performant, they take that challenge. They're like, boom, I will overcome that right now. And if I can't, I know I can rely on this person to help me. And everybody has faith in each other. So when they show up to a meeting, they know everybody else is going to be there at the meeting, not just physically there. Because how many times have you gone to a physical meeting and about halfway through, you're like, oh, I should pay attention, right? Yeah. In the virtual world, the focus can be so refined. Your meetings can be much more effective. And then you have wonderful tools like being able to record the meeting, have it transcribed for you. All of these tools enhance your ability to be mentally present, whether you're physically or present or not.
Yeah, I know, that's great. So how do you get people that maybe are struggling? Like you said, there's some technological impacts that they're having remotely, or how do we get them to get past those uncomfortable spots and get them performing?
So if it depends on what stage of team formation you're in. If you're in team forming, right, you're just starting from scratch, or going from the physical world to the virtual world has caused everybody to go, okay, let's do this thing. They're all excited because they get to work from home for the first time. So enthusiasm is high and skill is low. then at that point, you just need some subject matter expert to say, this is how we do X, this is how we do Y, here are the expectations. When I came to the center, you guys had documentation already in place about this is meeting etiquette. If you've not ever seen the video conference in the real world, or teleconference in the real world.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's so funny.
Love it. It still happens to us sometimes, which I just find awesome when someone's dog barks in the background. I'm just
go to YouTube and Google. What's the keywords to Google? I'm thinking of YouTube. Teleconference or
real world, yeah.
Real world teleconference, or it's pretty funny. So there's kind of a stigma going around with being virtual, that you can't supervise, or people can't be efficient when they're virtual. What would you say to those comments that people say about that?
Well, it's true. It's true in the same way that it's true that in the physical world, it's true. The same issues that exist in the physical world exist in the virtual world. They're just easier to overcome in the virtual world. You're naturally set up to overcome those issues in the virtual world, where you have to go to more extreme measures to overcome them in the physical world. So what was the first thing you mentioned?
So efficiency, it's like supervision and then efficiency.
Okay, so supervision in the physical world. How do you supervise in the physical world? You meet with them, you get emails, and you do spot checks on their work. You talk to your customers, you talk to their coworkers. Well, if you don't do that in the physical world and you don't do that in the virtual world, you're not supervising. You have no vision, let alone supervision, where you can see more. So it's the same thing.
And virtually, wouldn't you say, like, you actually can see more because you have recorded meetings, you have everything's documented in Slack or your instant messaging software. Like, things don't get lost at the water cooler. You know, that everything, people that weren't there that day don't miss out because it's still documented in the instant message. So people that missed today can go back to the prior day's stuff and be like, oh, that's what happened. So it's interesting that people have that mindset, because I'm in agreement with you. It's actually the opposite in the virtual world. It's actually easier. Oh no, I think I lost Cameron. Oh, there he's back.
So it's natural in the virtual world for supervision to happen, because you literally have supervision. You want to know what's going on. You look at a channel in Slack and you can see what's going on. You can pull metrics from the interactions people are having. It is so simple to supervise in the virtual world. It takes a lot more effort to do it right in the physical world. And you know what? That's why people don't quit companies, they quit supervisors. And that's why it's so hard to supervise in the real world, is because you don't have these tools set up in a natural way. If you want to take a look at the supervision aspects, they start calling it micromanaging, right? And all it is you're just trying to get a good handle on how things are going. Well, in the virtual world, it's all at your fingertips. It's on your displays instantly. So
I think if you have the right people, like, I'm such a believer, and you get the right people on the bus and then the right people in the right seats on the bus. So let's talk about both of those. So the first aspect, and I think this concept comes from the book Good to Great, if any of you have read that. So the right people on the bus, like, how do you know if somebody's in the virtual world going to work out in a good, and then you also, I know you're opinionated on how, if they should exit, like what your opinion on with people exiting the company as well. So let's talk about that. How do you know they're the right fit for the company and working for you?
So there are some things that require a certain skill set that you have to hire for. But a lot of positions, you can find many options for that skill set. And it's the right person that matters. And that goes back to your core values. And we don't, our core values, they're really awesome. They're very simple, easy to understand. It's to do the right thing, get it done, build people up, and embrace the uncomfortable. Just 4 values. Everything we do falls into that category. So as you're talking to someone, as you're about to bring them on, you just identify whether or not the traits that they're showing in that interview can align with the 4 values. And if they don't align with the 4 values, you don't hire them. Or if you're unsure, you do another interview so that you can see if they can be brought out. And you don't hire someone because they have the right skills if they don't have if the values don't fit. You do a consulting, okay? You contract with them. You don't bring them into your family, okay? You have them fix your fridge and then leave.
Actually, that reminds me of a good point. How many times there's some situations where if you don't want somebody to quit their job quite yet, but you want to kind of test them out to see if they're good. In the physical world, it's really hard to do this. But when you're virtual, like we've had many instances where like, let's just test it out a little bit. We'll do a few projects together. After hours, they can work a little bit. And because we're already plugged in virtually, it works out really well to kind of test relationships before we have to uproot somebody or from their job. And even then, what's cool is we're not having to like move a family over to Boise, Idaho, where we're headquartered. And then what if they don't work out? And then now we've, potentially ruined this family's life for a while, or uprooted them at least, and changed their life drastically. And so it just allows for just to make sure things work out on both sides, because it really is a partnership, wouldn't you agree, between the business owner or the company.
And you did this really well. That's actually how I started here, right? It was, hey, part-time for, I don't know what, part-time hours for a certain number of weeks. And then I'm here and I'm like, oh, I want to be
sucking people in
all the time, right? You sucked me in. And at that point, then you could make a decision. You had gotten to know me well enough. I'd gotten to know the company well enough that I was like, no, this is where I want to be. And then it was just a matter of making it work. So I think that it's really, it's smart to do that. Try people out.
So I know there's been a lot of situations where we've moved, people weren't working out in a spot and we're like, man, we really like them, but they're just not performing in this spot. And so we would move them to another position and we're like, oh my goodness, they're really performing now in this spot. What's kind of your take on the right people on the right seats on the bus?
So once they're on the bus, they're part of your family, and it's your responsibility to try and find the proper place for them to really thrive. And if they're not going to thrive on the bus, you should eject them. We'll talk about that maybe later. But trying them out in different seats, and that can be painful for everybody. And so it's best just to acknowledge it with them, right? We had, I'm looking at a couple of our all-stars. The most amazing jobs, the skilled, no one else in the world can do what they do as well as they do. They didn't start there. They tried several different things. We recognized they had value. They were bringing it to the table, but we had to adjust with them, working with them, knowing what the goal was, to find the perfect fit for them and to give them the resources to really maximize and amplify their ability to do even more. And you'll hear me talk about when you promote people to their level of incompetence. So many companies will do that, and they'll promote someone and they stink at that because that's not their skill set, or they've crept up just enough to not be comfortable or not to be skilled enough. And instead of moving them back to where they were thriving or moving them over to where it's a better fit, you just expect them to change and grow beyond what their desires are. So for us, we do a couple things. Number one, we are very clear in what our vision is. We're very clear what our values are. That we bring them into the bus. Everybody knows, hey, you're getting on the values bus here. Now, once you're here, now we talk about what their vision is, what their desires are, what their passions are. And we see if there's a seat on the bus that happens to overlap their desires and their passions. And we try and move them towards that. And what's difficult is sometimes they think in their mind, oh, but I want that title, or I want that esteem of having that position, when they're not good at it. And so I think what we have found here is when we work with them and we move them to the proper seat, it feels so good. It feels so wonderful to be that performant that they never want to, they're like, oh, forget that whole esteem ego thing. This is where I excel. And that's where that's how you know if someone's in the right seat. It's when they become so performant that they are magnifying their ability, and they might still have passions and desires to move in different positions, and that's great. We can work with them on that, help them develop the gaps, but they become performant. They get tons done. The value is not a concern when they're in the right seat. It's just natural.
Yeah. No, I really like what you said, that, people are coming to work at your company for different reasons. And I think it's important to understand what their reason is. Obviously, they do have to align with the company vision and core values, but they also have their own reason. In our world, a lot of people come and apply for jobs with us because they want to be able to go pick up their kids from school, or like that's a big priority for them. And so I think about some of the people that do that go and pick up their kids from school around 3 o'clock. And what would that look like in a traditional world or in a brick and mortar? If people are leaving at 3, go pick up their kids and come back to work, one, it's hard to get going again when you go back to a brick and mortar. Your company might not be located where their home is. And secondly, it's always been, I remember when I had a traditional brick and mortar company, how, people kind of frowned upon it. Well, why are they getting to leave early? And so now you don't look at all that petty stuff goes away, and it's more on how much are they performing? What are they producing, and how well are they communicating? Would you agree? Like that's kind of what?
Absolutely. And you actually brought up another one of those myths about working virtual, and that you're not going to be as productive. And I don't understand where that came from. I used to work in an office, and there's a guy, we'll call him Joe. That's not his real name. But my coworkers back then, if they were watching this, they would know exactly who I'm talking about, because he would disappear. He would drink his morning coffee at his desk, and then he would disappear for a while with the newspaper. And, an hour later, he would come in, and then he would mosey in to the working state. And about an hour and a half before it was time to leave, he would start to check out and mosey out. He would be physically present, but not being on, not being present. So, as you shifted 5 years ago, that was early adoption of virtual. How did you handle the discovery that people are still people, even though it's remote? And some people wanted to check out early, and those people who would go pick up their kid and come back and be back on, was that readily apparent? Was it easy for you to tell?
Well, I think for me, it was definitely a process. The way we ended up being virtual was we were kind of forced into it more slowly than what companies are now, where they're like forced to in 2 days be virtual. We found we couldn't find the right talent in Boise with what we needed. And so we started, and people would like not show up for interviews, and we're like, this is crazy because we have this great job opportunity. And so we started to look outside of that. And so we started to start doing the virtual thing. We still had a little bit of a smaller office, and then the office started to get dusty because we started to hire more and more people outside of Boise. And so then we kind of went onto this virtual world, but we did make some mistakes early on. We hired a lot of more freelance type mindset people. And I realized that some of them were we had to make sure that we communicated that this is really still a legitimate company, just like, you would go work for a brick and mortar, and there's still expectations that you have to meet. You can't choose when to work, or, within reason. You still have to produce, and you still have to check in every day and do your daily stand-ups every day and get involved in team meetings. Team meetings aren't optional, they're all part of the productivity and the environment. And so it definitely, we definitely made mistakes early on. And so in our interview process and in the way we communicate to new employees, like we make sure that they know that this is, it's still just like any other office environment. There's still commitments that you have to commit to, and that you have to still produce. And I had an experience a few years back where there was somebody that literally thought as long as they were plugged into their phone and remote, he still got paid his full salary. And so like literally a weekend, he's taking all of his cars to the auto shop, and he's like, I'm available, I'm remote, and it's like, no, that's really not what remote means. And so we learned, it's unfortunate, it takes like one person to where you like have to like start defining what remote really means, or what working really means, and earning your keep. You're paid this much money, and we expect value in exchange. And so as long as we see that we're getting the value for what you're paying, it's a great relationship, and we don't have to micromanage as much. So
that makes sense. So now, so that was 5 years ago that you started going remote. now we're 100% remote. How do you handle it when you feel that someone would be better off somewhere else? What strikes you? How does that come to your mind as far as, you know what, I think this individual would probably thrive at a different company or in a different environment?
Yeah, great question. So I've really evolved in this area. I think for a long time I thought when people quit, I would be like, oh, what did I do wrong? Or I never looked at it from the standpoint, or if I kept an employee longer, I thought that I was doing them a favor, where now I'm like, if people aren't the right fit, I just realized I'm doing them a disservice if we don't let them go sooner rather than later, because it's stalling their progression, because they're meant to be somewhere else. We know that it's not the right fit. So the sooner they get on to their next chapter in their lives, the sooner they're progressing as a person, and the sooner, and, so I think as employees and as the employer, I think both sides, always evaluate and making sure that they are where they need to be, because stalling either way is not helping either party out.
That makes sense. So for you, it's act sooner than later. Because once you kind of know. I remember the conversation I had with one of the supervisors of someone we were going to let go, and we had the opportunity to we were going to let him go no matter what, because performance-wise, he wasn't thriving. He wasn't being successful within the company. And I was talking to the supervisor and asking, so we can make it part of this restructure so that he can get unemployment, or we can fire him for cause, terminate his employment for cause, and give him the opportunity to change. And with the conversation we had was, would he, at this point, would he be able to internalize the feedback we were giving him so that he could be a better employee at his next job and maybe have more success? And it was determined that he wouldn't, he couldn't at that point. So we actually just put it as part of the restructure so that he could benefit from, the unemployment at the time, and hopefully discover those things or grow into a position where he could take feedback, which was probably the main reason he wasn't a good fit here. Anyway, that was a very interesting chapter, because when as he was on his way out, he started sharing a bunch of stuff with me, and I was like, this would have been helpful. Why didn't you say anything? How do you create an environment where people feel safe in a virtual world, where in a physical world, you can go to someone's office and you can close the door, but everybody knows you're in the office of that person. So I don't know how they do it in the physical world.
Because you can just direct message people. Like, we have very much an open door policy. An open door to us is you have access to my Slack, channel, or our Slack feed, and so they can say, hey, can we jump on a Zoom call, and then you can go into a face-to-face Zoom call, and so I think it's like more discreet virtually, and it doesn't make people start gossiping, like, I wonder why they're meeting with them, or I hate gossip, I hate drama. So when I went virtual, it's like, I don't care if they don't take out their garbage, I don't care if they look bad from the waist down, I just care what their background looks like and what they look like from the waist up. So it just simplifies things, I think, all the way around. And so,
there's something else about the communication that can happen when everybody's used to doing instant communication and or like instant messaging or video calls. We had a video training this morning, and a follow-up question came into my Slack. And so I'm going to record a video on this later, but the question was really awesome. It said, thank you for the insightful training today. I've had a chance to marinate on today's training topic. Had a question come to mind. If you're part of a team and give a valid contrast question or option, how do you handle it being prevent it from being perceived as a Debbie Downer and not moving along with the team? In other words, how do you balance that? Hey, there are some risks here, or there are some things here. That question, as a follow-up to a training that was done earlier, that doesn't happen in the physical world. You back in the day when I was a corporate trainer in HR, I would hand out an eval sheet, and it was just basically, how entertaining was I? I made the eval sheet, and that's what I valued. I wanted to keep them awake, there was never the opportunity for them to then ask a follow-up question later on. And here we had the training. A couple hours later, they had a question. Now I can make a video on that, broadcast it back to that team, and to also add it to value for everybody else. So that instant communication has much more value than a traditional office where if you do a training and then you exit, there's no automatic circling back to address additional questions or concerns.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, we make it pretty clear when we do a lot of trainings or conversations around making sure that they bubble up concerns that they have. And like you said, I think the key is as leadership, making sure that employees feel safe and that they know that they can come to you with questions or concerns, and that we value them, and we also value implementing whatever change it might be if it seems like the right thing to do. And so I think the safer you can make that environment and make more of that open door policy so people can communicate. Because when people, like you said, when people start to exit and all of a sudden all these things are coming up that they are concerned about, it's like, well, why didn't you tell us that 2 months ago? That would have been very helpful. And it would have opened up that dialogue with that employee, because most likely that's one of the reasons why they were let go, is because they weren't open and transparent with some of the things that they were concerned with. And so in a virtual world, you can feel that, and you know that they're not engaging or they're disconnecting, and so you really go off that communication and emotion much more virtually. So
I agree that you have an instant sense of how engaged an employee is at any given time. And I know we're about out of time. We had kind of a hit to our company this week with someone that is beloved is out sick, very possibly ill. We have hopes things are looking better. We'll find out tomorrow, but we could tell almost instantly that this was affecting our entire team. And so we've been able to reach out and do more for them, where in an office environment, I really do think that it would have been more isolation, because people would not have realized, wow, there's a disconnect or engagement has decreased. And I don't think it would have been readily apparent that it had happened. And so action wouldn't have immediately started taking place from our employee experience channel and the supervisors and the leadership team to then start to reach out and make sure that people were engaging and that they were feeling part of the solution and not being left to wonder and just be concerned for this individual. So that's a whole nother aspect of the power of building teams in a virtual environment, is that level of engagement. It is apparent when you have it and it goes away.
Yeah.
And action should be taking place.
No, we really felt that with that, just how strong our team really is with that illness. And then the other kind of crazy thing that happened this week was we had an earthquake in Boise, Idaho, and we don't have earthquakes in Boise, Idaho. And there was one the prior week in Salt Lake City. So Cameron shared this funny meme where it was Salt Lake. It was a gambling type meme where, what was Salt Lake's?
Theirs was like a 5-4 or something.
5-4, and we'll raise you to a 6-5 or whatever. And so we're hoping that Salt Lake doesn't raise us again. So with a larger earthquake, but the interesting thing is, literally minutes after that happened, we had somebody on Slack, and literally our entire team, especially the people in Boise, were all on Slack communicating, making sure everybody was okay. And it was like, you would not have had that in a physical world, that connection and that ability to communicate so quickly and realize that we're all in this together. We truly are a family to help each other out. And I've said this in another live where, if there's a hurricane in Florida, it helps, and they can't get internet access, other people on the team pitch in and can fill the void that because they can't work. And it's just, we've seen time and time again the benefits that have come from a virtual company. And I think Cameron getting emotional on that just shows like how I love it, because like it really shows the heart that we have in our company, and that this is really something truly real, and that you can develop that same realness in your company virtually. And I empower you, I inspire you. I hope I inspire you to really think twice about, whether you want to take your company virtual after this whole crisis that we're all in. A lot of schools are out till the end of the year, so there's very well, because schools are out, the companies will probably have to stay virtual at least through the end of the year, and so, or end of the school year. And so this isn't a short-term thing potentially for companies, and so it allows you to really test the waters and see if it's something that you would like to really implement within your company. And if you have any questions, reach out to us. We really want to be there for other companies and inspire you to do that. Cameron, do you have any last thoughts before we close?
Most people didn't meet that individual physically. And yet there's such a connection that when she is going through her trials, that affects us. And that's the type of company I want to belong to, whether it's physical or virtual.
Thank you. That's great. One of the things I'd mentioned was about a flywheel, how, you start to build on, like as your team starts to get stronger, and as people's hearts start to expand more and people start to care more, like it bleeds into other people. And before you know it, people's lives are changing, people's priorities are changing. And I really have always believed that entrepreneurship and business is the key to changing the lives of people, the lives of families, the lives of the communities, the lives of the world. Like, it starts here. And so I hope that this video inspires you to understand the importance of keeping your team strong, and making sure that you communicate that with them on what an effective team, what it means to your company to be an effective team and to be a productive team. And so with that, I want you guys to all, if you like these types of videos, go to our company page. We talk a lot about teamwork and different blogs and virtual teams and things like that. It's the Center Official. So the Center is spelled CENTR. I recommend going to our site and follow us and like us. And then you can also find Cameron and I's personal, what do you call them, Instagram and Facebook profiles. That's what I'm looking for, and follow us there, because we really are passionate about virtual. We're passionate about simplifying business for companies and keeping you productive. So with that being said, thank you, and I will see you next Tuesday for another live. Thanks, Cameron. This was really fun.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, talk soon.